Today I wanted to come here and I want to talk about one of those big questions. One of those questions that's like always coming back to my mind. And not in the way that like sometimes in this series I'll talk about it of like, oh, I think about this every now and again. Like genuinely, I've thought about this probably almost daily my entire life since I discovered what it was, and that's fate. I mean, like, you read the title, it's fate. And I want to say I've had kind of a journey with it. When I first heard about fate, it was probably watching like, one of the cartoons as a kid where they mention it. And upon hearing about it for the first time, I remember thinking it was the coolest thing on earth, not having much of a critical thought around it, because, I'm what, 6, maybe 10, when I'm first hearing about something like this, and I just thought it was cool, right? As I got a little older, into my, when not when you start really developing your thoughts, but you start developing, what you think are your thoughts around, 13, 14, when you're developing things, you're starting to think about things more critically, right? That's when I got really edgy with it, I'll be honest. I had edgy takes on, religion and, just kind of, more or less everything. And fate was one of those things. I was like, fate's just not real. I thought, no way that I am being controlled right now, that I am in any reality being told what to do by any higher power. It definitely went hand in hand with my religion thing, because I don't think that necessarily this has to be true, but I think oftentimes it is true that when you believe in fate, religion many a time comes along with it. Not always, but it certainly makes fate a lot easier to palate when you put a god next to it, right? So me having these super edgy takes on religion, I brought them right into fate too. I was like, there's no way this is real. And then 2 things happened. One of which is genuinely unbelievable, and it was the final straw. But the first thing was much more simple. It was me just having conversations with my teacher. This was probably late high school. I can't tell you if I was in 10th or 11th grade, and I remember this teacher would just debate with me. He would be like, he was a huge believer in fate. And to this day, I don't really understand why. I'd love to ask him about it, to be honest. Because I didn't get why he was all so gung-ho for it. But he genuinely was super into it. And I remember I'd go and I'd debate him on it every day. And my big thing was that, how can your fate be, let's say your fate is to become a billionaire, but you just sit and be lazy all day. How will it possibly work? What, you're going to win the lottery and then somehow that's going to happen? I was like, no, this makes no sense. And again, I want to say, and I think a lot of thoughts when you're younger, even at the age I am at now, I'm sure a lot of thoughts would fall into this category. They're thoughts that you think make a lot of sense, but they're just really not that crazy of a conundrum or a thought or anything like that. And I remember this was a specific conversation. I remember where I had this idea where I was like, no, that can't work for these reasons. And he basically went, no, because then your fate would be not to work, right? And he kind of would debate me on it a lot. And I won't say that it opened me up to the idea of fate, or I wouldn't say that it convinced me that fate is real necessarily, but it definitely made me a lot more open to it, right? Because this was a teacher who, in school, as I'm sure you've gathered by now, if you've watched a couple of these, I definitely didn't have the best relationship with my teachers or anything like that. I wasn't a model student in a lot of ways, even though I really enjoyed learning and all that. So I think for me, to have this teacher who I respected a good bit debate me on this, it definitely opened me up to it. I was like, if this guy's smart and he believes in it, maybe there's something here with this fate thing, right? And then something else happened. And this is something that, if I can find the picture, I'm going to include it because it's a little bit unbelievable, but I'll try to include the picture if I can find it. Because this is one of the craziest occurrences of my life. And it's one of the reasons I'm here right now recording this. I remember that right around, it was middle high school, I quit all my art, right? I quit art completely. And I said, by the way, just for context, at this time, I was referring to myself as Dice. I've referred to myself with the name Dice for a long time. And, for a lot of reasons, but mainly, I think I've discussed them in some of these Paint and Talks even, but that's all you need to know. I was referring to myself as Dice at the time, and I got my first girlfriend, right? And between me being kind of burnt out on the amount of art I was doing, I was drawing every day, I was doing YouTube probably at the time, and I was getting really burnt out. And I was like, oh, like, you know, now that I have this girl, I was kind of preoccupied, I was happier, I was definitely in a different zone of mind for sure. And I decided to quit art. I was like, no, I'm happy, I don't need to be forcing myself. You know, art's always been, in a lot of ways, I've always loved it, but at times it's almost become a coping mechanism for me, where it's like, when I have nothing to do, it was always like, no, I'm gonna put my head down and work as hard as I can on an artistic project. Probably one of my healthier coping mechanisms in life, and I've always loved it. I mean, it's definitely gotten me farther than any other, you know, mechanism would, even though I don't even view it as a coping mechanism. I think I use it sometimes as that, but I don't view it that way. But that's besides the point. I gave up on it because I was so preoccupied. I was happy. I was feeling a little burnt out. I was feeling a little bit like, you know, I always did art, I always loved doing art, but I didn't do it quite the same way that I do it now, where, you know, now I definitely am a little bit smarter than I was at 16 or 15, whatever this was, and I have more things to say in the art. So I think the way that I was creating back then was a little bit more forced onto myself, and, you know, there's a million things here going on. The bottom line is I quit art because I had this girl, and I was preoccupied, I was happy, and I remember it was, you know, let's say I got with this girl towards like the end of a year. That following summer, as school ended, we broke up, right? Very normal stuff. That's not the main point of the story here. But I remember after that, I was really sad, and I was walking around the city with a couple of friends, and I saw a sign, or not a sign. It was kind of, I wouldn't say it was graffiti either though. It was almost carved into this exit of a subway, and it said "free dice," right? And I obviously right away took a picture, and I took that as like, oh my God, like I need to start making art the second I get home. Like I need to go back to this. I can't, you know, why did I quit that? That made me so happy. Even if I felt burnt out on it, it made me so happy. Why did I ever quit that? The funniest part about this is actually the second I went home, I didn't start making art again. I didn't start making art again for months, but it planted the idea in my mind that you need to do this. Like this is something bigger. And you know, so I'm not someone who believes, you know, I wouldn't say I'm delusional enough to go and say, I think God carved this into the subway so I could see it. You know, I'm sure some guy carved, maybe it didn't even say free dice. Maybe it kind of looked like that to me because of what was on my mind. Maybe, you know, someone carved it in, their other friend is named Dice and they are in jail and they carved that for that reason. You know, whatever could be going on. I didn't think it was there for me, but the fact of the matter is I saw the right thing at the right time. And the chances of that happening are so small, especially with a phrase like free dice, you know, let that part of me out, is something that I was like, wow, this is, you know, again, I believe that it was put there for me, but I thought that I saw the right thing at the right time in a way that I just genuinely couldn't deny. And for about a year after that, I probably went on believing in fate like wholeheartedly, right? I believed in every aspect of fate. I thought that my course in life was going to be predetermined, that I had no part in it, and I should basically surrender all will to fate. It's interesting, I still didn't believe in a higher power, but I believed in fate as if there was one, and that's something I never really, you know, had the thought to even start thinking about, I guess. I just kind of blindly followed where my mind took me, that, you know, fate is real. As time went on, though, you know, I had to kind of put these beliefs up against the world in a way, right? You know, as I became older, became a little smarter, and I started looking around at the world around me, I had to kind of face a certain level of like, okay, let's say fate is real, right? How do you juggle fate with all these other forces in the world? Let's say it's somebody's fate to be a billionaire, go back to that example, right? But they're born in a poor family in, you know, the projects of some major city, right? The chances of that happening are significantly smaller than if it's someone's fate and they're born in another area. right? And this is definitely a strange way of looking at fate. I think a lot of people would disagree with this way of looking at it, but and even honestly, if I'm like kind of judging what I just said here, the way I put it was definitely not the most fate-oriented, but the bottom line here is you got to kind of put fate at a certain point up against the real world. How do you do that and still balance fate, right? And you know, looking at the state of the world, and I think especially something that did it for me was like as I grew up and I saw just how money worked and how the system we're in works, and the lack of class mobility and wage growth versus inflation, you know, all these like economic things. It sounds so boring, but these really did affect my view of fate, because I was like, okay, how does fate work in this world? You know, with all these forces at play here, how is fate supposed to like do its thing, right? That was kind of my big question. And I wouldn't say it really made me stop believing in fate. You know, I don't think that's what happened, but it definitely made it so I stopped juggling my own thoughts about fate. You know, I think at this time I acted as if I believed nothing, and honestly, I probably didn't know quite what I believed. And anytime fate would be brought up, I would just kind of abstain from the conversation in large part. This comes till recently when I kind of came to, I hate centrism in all regards, and you know, from politics to morality to everything, but I almost would say I have a centrist viewpoint on fate these days. I think that fate is real where it's allowed to be real, right? So I do think, you know, I've seen too many things in my life, too many happy coincidences have happened for me to completely rule out the idea of fate. It just fully, like if I'm being honest, removing all logic from the conversation here, too many good things, too many bad things, too many things at the right time have happened for me to go, I don't think any of this is real, right? I also want to believe, quite frankly, in a certain level of fate. I think it's nicer, this idea of fate, than everything just being random or determined by, you know, economic systems and science. Like if you look at the world like that, you're probably closer to the truth than anyone else, but your life's a little bit worse. So I kind of didn't want to look at it like that. It didn't work for me. So I kind of was like, okay, I think there's a degree of fate here, but I still need to balance this against everything else, right? And my bad if I've talked about this before, actually, but I came to the conclusion that fate has to exist in entropy. That's the only place that it makes sense, right? What do I mean by this? So fate can happen only in the parts of your life that you can't control. So is it my fate to wake up tomorrow and, you know, paint again? Yes and no. There's nothing going on there, right? It's going to be my decision to wake up and paint tomorrow. That's in my own hands. But if, you know, let's say I'm painting tomorrow and in the middle of the Paint&Talk, the light above me flops down and it goes viral or whatever, and you know, it gets a gajillion views. That I think would be fate, because I had no control over that light falling down then. I had no control over how that happened, why it happened, and all I can assume is that that happened because I was in the right place at the right time, and I believe that is fate. This is also why I think I've said this before, that I make so many decisions in my life with a dice, because I think that, you know, the number that this dice roll is something that I can't control, therefore only the right number would be rolled. So if I'm debating between, you know, 10 different thumbnails, I'll literally roll a 10-sided dice and follow it and say, okay, this is, you know, it is, I believe that in a certain level of fate, that must be the right answer of what this dice rolls, because I have no other option but to believe that, since I don't have control over how this dice, you know, lands. So I think fate can exist, but it needs to exist in the areas that you can't control. I think this also can work in a far less literal sense, in just like the general areas of life that are up to other people, right? So like for an example, there would be, let's say I'm going over my friend's house, right? And I am like, I don't know if I want to go or not. Let me leave it up to fate for me to say, for me to text my friend like, thinking of stopping by Friday, are you around? Leaving that decision up to them then becomes fate, because I'm leaving it out of my hands. Almost like my thoughts on religion, I've gone over them on Paint and Talk before. I kind of am like scared of how many things I've talked about on here at this point. But I guess I started it knowing that. So my thoughts on religion are relatively agnostic, right? So I wouldn't apply my understanding of fate directly to religion. I mean, it definitely can be, but I just don't, because it makes my thoughts have to be more fleshed out than I think I'm smart enough to make them, if I'm being completely honest. But I do think that, know how people are like, oh, I'll let God decide. I'll surrender this decision to God. I feel the same way about fate a lot of the time. I'll surrender this decision to fate, right? So if I don't know, let's say I meet a stranger and they give me their number and they're like, oh, text me, we should hang out. And I don't know if I want to like really hang out with them. I don't know if it's the right decision to hang out with this person. This has never happened, by the way. I'm just using it as an example. I'll send a text and just like let it just like see if they respond. If they don't respond after 2 days, like it's like, okay, that wasn't meant to be, you know, whether they got busy and didn't see the text or they you know, whatever it may be. Okay, that's fine, you know, that's good. In that sense, I feel, you know, I don't think it's really provable at all, to be honest, but I feel as though I'm surrendering it to a different power, you know. I'm letting fate exist in the areas that I can't control, because in the ones that I can, I think also this comes out of a certain practicality, in my opinion, because like for me to go, like, okay, I don't think, or like, I think fate is real. I'm fated to become the greatest artist of all time. And then I don't paint every day, but I still believe that. I think that's delusion. So in a sense, you know, but like, I also would love to be like, I think I'm going to be the greatest artist of all time. But I don't want to believe that too hard, because then maybe I won't put in the work to become the greatest artist of all time. You know, like all these loopholes that you can go down in your mind, to me, can be resolved by doing everything you can while believing that the things you can't do will turn out right one way or another. And that's genuinely just the way I look at it. Like, that's the way I think, like I'm saying here, like there is a practicality to this of like, this is almost how I have to look at it, because, well, one, it would boggle my mind if I don't. And my mind's already changed on this so much that I think I couldn't take it anymore if it changed again. That's like part of this for sure. I'm sure you guys can tell through these videos, I'm very indecisive, and sometimes when it comes to like trying to have to think of like a fully fleshed out thing, I'll just like go insane because I can't do it every now and again. I'll fully admit that. Fate might just be one of those things. Like there is a solid chance that the reason I have these beliefs, the reason I have these thoughts, is because it hurt my head too much to try and wrap my head around a understanding of fate where I'm totally in control or totally not in control. I like the idea that I'm a little bit in control because it gets me to do what I need to do. And because I'm so indecisive, something that gets me to do what I need to do will always be better for me than something that either A, allows me to do nothing, or B, makes me choose what to do, you know? Almost like how in the Fall, the guy, the main, or not the main character, well, I guess he's kind of the main character, he's like, the thing people want least is freedom, because they don't want to have to decide things for themselves. They can't handle that. I would say I'm that way, which is why I surrender some of my things to fate, and I believe that I can surrender them to fate. But anyways, I hope that made some semblance of sense. I think I maybe got a little too meta with it at the end, so let me know if you guys want me to elaborate further, which I'm going to guess the answer is no. Anyways, this is the painting. Honestly, so I tried doing the face and the shadows thing again. Looks way better than the last time I did it. A little bit of improvement there, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, you guys know the drill. Go check this out over on the Instagram. See it with all the different angles, the XYZ, the bada boom, the bing bang, ba ba ba. All the stuff is over on there. And until tomorrow, guys, gals, and pals, this has been Paint and Talk episode 47. I'm here every morning painting and talking with you all.